Kevin, I appreciate your time and coming on the show.
Yeah, it's great to be here, Nolan. Thanks for having me.
So the first person that I heard of Perennial by is Will Hudgens, who used to work y'all's farmers market stands, I guess. And he actually
Yes, sir.
told
Yeah.
me early on in the podcast, he's like, you need to see if you can get this guy on. And I didn't listen to him. I should have, but that's the first connection. And the second one is Harry and Brett, who you obviously know. I actually work for them, and two mentors in many ways for me. So this is very cool to be able to be here. And also the third thing is college baseball. I wanted to start there if that's all right with you.
Nice.
My understanding, you played at
Yeah, that'd
USD.
be great. I did. Yep.
What position were you?
I played center field.
Oh, right on. I actually
I was
went
there
to.
from.
There's a little bit of a lag.
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry. No, you're good.
No worries.
You can go ahead. You said you played center field.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So I played center. I went there as a shortstop. I went to a small high school in L.A. called Loyola High School, and then I was a recruited walk on at University of San Diego, and then eventually got a scholarship. But I played. I was a shortstop in high school, and then got into the outfield in college, and it was a leadoff hitter. Liked to steal a lot of bases, and yeah, baseball was my life for first probably 22, 23 years of my life.
That's pretty wild to hear because that's more or less the exact same scenario that I had. I was a recruited walk on to Virginia Tech, and 22, 23 years of my life. I'm 24 now, so pretty recent for me, but that was my love for sure.
Okay, yeah.
My 100% my focus, my passion, my drive. And I just think it's cool because college baseball is different than a lot of college sports, in my opinion. It's baseball in general is just a different sport, considering that it's a game of failure, especially as a hitter. I actually went to VT as a catcher, but couldn't figure out how to hit off speed. So luckily, I had a good arm and finished my last 3 years as a pitcher.
Nice. Were you a starter or a bullpen guy?
Bullpen guy. And I went to a perfect game. Did you play perfect game stuff when you were growing up?
Yeah, I did a little bit of that.
I went to like a perfect game underclass thing at USD, and I got to tell you, I almost am envious or jealous of you that you got to play there. That's an incredible place to spend time. That campus and the field is absolutely insane.
Yeah, the field wasn't there when I was there, but obviously the campus was, and it's a really good good place on the planet. San Diego's a fun city, and we had Pacific Beach there, and yeah, it's definitely a good place to go to college. When the girl to guy ratio is like 60-40, that works out pretty good too. So
Unfortunately, I think it's the opposite at Virginia Tech, if I'm not mistaken. But my podcast generally, like a lot of podcasts, are about specific ideas or niches and things like that. I focus more on stories. I'm fascinated by how people get to where they are from where they were, and that's part of the reason I wanted to get into college baseball for you. So my first question is simply put, like, how did you get to where you are now, Kevin, at this current stage of your life from where you were, where you were being however far back you want to go?
Sure. Yeah, I'd say my story really started with college baseball. I got really into the paleo diet and eating grass-fed beef. And I didn't know it at the time, but it was going to lead to really what I call my calling now, what I'm doing now, which is regenerative agriculture. And started with a book called The Paleo Diet by Dr. Lauren Cordain. And I had a CrossFit strength and conditioning coach in college that helped us get into shape, and he really pushed me in that direction. So I read the book, and there's a lot of wisdom, obviously, in the paleo diet and eating grass fed, but also kind of eating more indigenously. So it was really fun for me to learn our evolutionary biology and how long we've been eating meat for, and how long we've been hunter gatherers for. So it piqued my curiosity. I've always been a pretty curious person. I grew up in Southern California. I was born in Los Angeles. I'm a first generation rancher. I grew up doing a lot of outdoor stuff too. So baseball and athletics were a big part of my life, but my family did a lot of activities, from water skiing to snowboarding. And I grew up going to the Eastern Sierras with my grandpa. I have a lot of really fond memories of the Eastern Sierras, Mammoth Mountain with my gramps. He was quite the outdoorsman, and I loved going outside and learning about nature with him. And so as I got through my baseball career, I really started, well, to back up, a kind of big catalyst in my baseball career was I got injured my junior year at USD, and I broke my hand, and it was a season-ending injury. And at that time, it was my draft year. It was a big year, kind of, you have a lot of leverage that year in your junior year. And I just started kind of questioning whether or not baseball was really my path in life. And that was when I started getting serious with my girlfriend, now wife of 12 years. Um, and just a lot of things started changing for me. And I started reading a little bit more. And again, it wasn't in 2011 when I jumped into regenerative agriculture, but pretty quickly after that, after I graduated, I worked 1 year in software sales and was lucky enough to be able to get a little nest egg at that company. It was a great company called ServiceNow, and it went public when we were there. So my wife, Dina, and I were able to get a little nest egg together. And after I ended my employment there, I worked 365 days to the year to vest 1 year's worth of stock options, and took those stock options and sold them, and just began sort of this journey, which I call it, kind of my regenerative agriculture journey. It started out with just gardening and permaculture and homesteading, and I was telling my wife, hey, we'll be fine. We're just gonna grow our own food. I won't have to work. We'll live the hippie lifestyle. It's gonna be awesome. But she wasn't really quite into that, and so decided to find a career in this space still, where I could have a career and scale and build a company. And so started really talking to other folks in the industry who had done that, had built businesses in this regenerative space. So worked with a lot of gurus and pioneers, and was really lucky to work for some really great minds and learn a lot from them. So that was like 2012, 2013. And here I am 10 years later, really 2023, or the end of 2023. And I'm running a couple different companies. The main one is Perennial Pastures, which is a direct-to-consumer meat business. And we manage 16,000 acres of land here in Southern California. And we're in 13 farmers markets, and we got a really big direct-to-consumer beef business online. We also sell chicken and turkey. And so that's really my passion. I kind of ended up in my passion and followed my heart to really what I think I was meant to do in this life, which is heal land and heal people. And our mission statement, we've been doing a lot of planning for 2024 at Perennial Pastures, and really for our whole ecosystem of companies, is enrich life by restoring connections, healing the land, and nourishing people. So that's our mission in life, is to do that, build the abundance. And we're really excited with where we're at. We're coming off a really great year in 2023, and we're excited for 2024 because we think really maximize our impact in the world, and where we're at here in Southern California. And I think a lot of people in our company just wake up with a fire in their bellies every day to just go to work and bring good beef to the people. So
Yeah, bring good beef to the people. That's awesome. That it's an incredible story. I'm first drawn to my curiosity is, if I had asked you 20 years ago when you were like 15 or whatever you were in your teens, hey man, you're going to be a rancher. Do you think that's true? Would you have believed me or no?
Probably not. No, I would have said I no. I don't know how you came to that conclusion, but I would have told you I would have been probably a baseball player for sure.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's probably what I would have said as well. I'm fascinated by people because I think sports specifically, especially at a high level. Obviously, you mentioned the draft. It sounded like that was your goal, and for somebody to take that seriously, it really does consume your whole life. So for me, it sounds like you had a similar experience when the realization that that wasn't going to happen kind of set in. You had to make a shift. And did I get that correctly? That you worked 365 days, and on that 365th day, you left just so you get the stock option?
Yeah, I invested one year's worth. I was a cold call sales guy, so I wasn't too fired up on that. I mean, it was again, I learned a lot, but I learned a lot in 6 months, and I wasn't really learning much more. And I knew I didn't want to be in software sales, even though it was a very amazing company and um, had great people in it. It just wasn't for me. But I wasn't foolish enough to throw away, one year's worth of stock options. So I was smart enough to do that, which really paid off. I did turn down quite a bit of money though on the 3 years that I left on the table, because if I would have stayed there for 4 years, we would have had a lot more stock options, which would be worth a lot of money today. But I don't really have any regrets, because 3 years of being delayed of where I'm at now today in my entrepreneurial career, I wouldn't trade for the world. I think I've hit this regenerative revolution with good timing. I think our generations are really waking up to soil health and food health and ecosystem health and nutrient density and all that fun stuff. So it's good timing, and we're excited to be where we're at today.
Yeah, you mentioned like it started with permaculture and homesteading. Is that something that you had always thought about, or did that even start pretty late in your development as a person, like when you were in college, or did you already kind of have that vision of I want to live a more um, sovereign lifestyle with my family, or did that kind of come about late as well?
MacGyver was a big influence on me as a kid, and you might not be old enough to know MacGyver, but he was
No.
kind of like a whiz sort of survivalist like TV show guy who could like do anything with like a Swiss Army knife. And yeah, I'm 35 years old, about to turn 36 on the 28th. So I grew up like watching this guy do anything from like a survivalist standpoint. I wanted to go to like these survival schools as a kid, and I probably should have been a Boy Scout, to be honest, but it coincided with the baseball season, and I was a pretty good athlete, so was stewarded in that direction by my family, and I'm thankful for it because I learned a lot of good lessons about sports. But I've always been kind of into nature, and I was a kid that asked for like buck knives so I could like whittle wood as a kid, and I don't know. I think in some ways it's been a long road just to this life that my wife and I are living now with our family, which is we live on 5 acres too. So we're getting to do the homestead deal as well, where we're building out our own property, but we're also building a larger company that does this work just at a larger scale, heals land at a larger scale. So it's fun to play with both scales, where you got kind of the closer in nutrient dense food to your house. We want to get some dairy goats. We have a little garden planted. We got to pay a little bit more attention to it, but we want to plant some fruit trees and have chickens, and the things that make sense to have close to home, and then the things that you need scale for, like beef or lots of dairy or pastured pork, um, or grain crops you can have on the farm or ranch. So we're kind of living the best of both lifestyles there.
Yeah, that's awesome. I got to tell you, that's pretty much. I think about that vision a lot for myself. Me and my brother talk about it all the time. Me and my friends always talk about like having a, a communal, not communal, but like a community that helps feed each other in that sense. And I think that's really cool. Another question I have is when you made the decision, you know what, I'm going to go down this regenerative ranching like rabbit hole and really take a risk and start a ranch. What was your first step? Because you're coming from, I believe I remember correctly, you're a business major in college. So what was the first step you took to becoming a regenerative rancher? That seems like a pretty steep ledge to step off.
For sure. Um, it's hard to say. It's been a pretty zigzag path, if you will, to where I'm at today. I started again with just gardening and taking some permaculture courses. I took my permaculture design course in 2013, and that was my intro into the space. And then I worked for an agroforestry guy. So I'd say the biggest things was just self education. I went to the best in the industry and said, "Hey, look, I have this business background. You know, I can sell from my ServiceNow inside sales experience. I can structure businesses. I can get things off the ground. I'm a go getter." So I just really went out there with my strengths and offered them to people who maybe didn't have those same strengths, and we formed teams. And that was really where I jumped off, was just forming a few companies, and then a few of those companies failed, a few of them succeeded, and just, you learned a lot through that failure. And there's a lot of resources out there today for folks that are looking to do this. There's tons of groups, from the Soil Health Academy courses to consultants to holistic management classes to soil health classes. There's just a ton of resources on YouTube. I tell a lot of people that my master's was through YouTube University, and and then there's no trading out, just going out and doing it and then failing and learning. So I'm going to constantly be learning in this field because there's so much to learn. But I feel like I've come a long way in 10 years, from a first generation rancher born in Los Angeles to doing what we're doing now today. And we have a great team, really. I've surrounded myself with awesome people that are passionate about what we're doing too, and who have the hard skills that I might not have had starting out. So, it's definitely not a straight line. It's a massive zigzag, but as long as you keep moving forward and learning, and you don't give up, you'll eventually accomplish, what you want to do.
Yeah, perhaps that's a lesson, maybe consciously, maybe subconsciously, that you took from baseball, because obviously baseball is a team sport. You need all nine guys in the lineup and the guy on the mound and the coaching staff and the strength and conditioning and the nutrition. You need all these different pieces to be a successful team. So perhaps that's a lesson that you took into this next season of your life. I'm curious if there's any other lessons from your baseball career that you think that you've brought into this next season.
I like that next season. Um, for sure, the team aspect, not giving up. Baseball, you fail. If you fail 70% of the time, you're considered Hall of Fame. So I kind of had that born into me from an early on. Just embrace failure, and it makes you better. I took a lot of things from the mental aspect in baseball. We were taught how to meditate for peak performance. So I was able, at a pretty early age in college, to sort of wrap my mind around the fact that I'm not my thoughts, and I can breathe into something more stable and kind of go inside. And that coincided with a lot of deep dives into my Catholic faith and the mystical roots of Christianity, and where Catholicism started, which is kind of a lot of these individual groups practicing in their own ways. And for a lot of those groups is very internal journey. And so meditation really brought that out for me. And I read some good books, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and a few other really good books on being present in life. And that helped me, I think, find my passion too. Because I think when you're able to quiet your mind and realize that you're not your thoughts, you can tap into some of your instincts better and where your gut's pulling you. And I think it helps you make decisions in life. So I feel like in a lot of ways, I'm just being guided. But baseball was sort of my outlet for peak performance, and it kind of catalyzed probably a lot of things that I already was thinking about, just being raised Catholic and things like that. So I have baseball to thank for that, though, because it melded the performance parts of my life with just being a good human being, So yeah, so those are some of the other things I think I brought from my baseball career into my professional career.
Very interesting. That's actually the very similar in my life as well. That's how I heard about meditation and all the different things that you can do to enhance your performance in life. I learned through like a performance coach we had at Virginia Tech that I think are very valuable. It's cool. It's cool to hear you bring up your faith as well. I consider working with the land and being in nature and what's the word, shepherding and stewarding land and animals to be a pretty spiritual experience. Would you relate to that?
For sure, yeah. I use the verb shepherding. I have Psalm 23 tattooed on my back, and I got that when I was 18 years old in college. It was my first tattoo. It's a cross with Psalm 23, and the Lord is my shepherd; I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. So little did I know, had no ideas of ranching at the time, but there was some ranching words, that I tattooed on myself, and those come from, as you probably may know, King David wrote that Psalm 23, and there's a lot of cool stories about him. So yeah, no, it is very spiritual when you realize that you're part of a greater whole, and that humans can have a very positive impact on nature and on in life. It's a special thing, because I think in today's society we're pretty disconnected in a lot of ways. My wife is a clinical psychologist and has a private practice, and so she deals with a lot of folks who are really trying to find that connection. And she's her early specialty here has been eating disorders, and eating disorders in a lot of ways are diseases of disconnection. They don't they think food is just caloric intake. It's not part of a landscape. You're not eating, a community, if you will. So when you can tap into that, tap into the community and the nature that provides for you and your family, it draws a bigger circle around your life, which I think is more important. It's very important in life to feel connected to a larger whole, and people are happier that way. So yeah, in a lot of ways, it's a very spiritual practice, and a sacred practice we've been doing for thousands of years. But bringing it back to the regenerative aspect, there's a lot of non-spiritual ways I think we currently practice agriculture. It's very manufacturing like. It's formulaic. Regenerative agriculture is very based on observation and being quiet yourself, and going out into the landscape and seeing what it needs and how you can use the animals in a way to improve a certain area. So it's heavy on the observational skills, which is also really fun too. So yeah, there's a lot of spiritual aspects to the job.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I would in many ways consider industrial slash conventional farming to be, or ranching to be, like the antithesis of a spiritual experience. It's almost uh, there's almost zero spirituality or zero intuition or instinct involved with it. And that leads me to my next question is like, what do you think the biggest, you might have just spoken about it, but what do you think the biggest downside to the way that we ranch and farm as a whole, industrially and conventionally is?
I'd say it's hard to put it into one primary negative impact, but if I was to maybe go for the top two, I'd say the depletion of the nutrient density in our food is a really big one. I don't know the exact stats, but I don't think I would be off base to say that the nutrients in our food have declined by at least 50%. And that's directly related to soil health. the less healthier our soil is, the less healthy our food's going to be. And so that's led to, I think, a lot of what we're seeing today with the increase in chronic diseases and folks just perpetually sick. So that would be the probably a very big one. The other one would just be desertification. I think that's probably one of the biggest issues we face today. A lot of people live in arid regions on the planet, which are very brittle. And if you look at the holistic management literature and you follow the work of Alan Savory, Alan came up with the brittleness scale. And it's land that, if your land's more brittle, it has less frequent rainfall and it's drier. It's more erratic in the in its rainfall regimes. And so a lot of folks live in, think of the Middle East, think of the Western U.S., think of a lot of dry regions in Northern Africa, Australia. A lot of people, 70% of the planet is considered to be dry or brittle of the land surface, let's say, right? So those desertified areas are increasing, and the only way that we can prevent desertification is through the proper management of livestock on the land at scale. There's so much land to heal in the West, in the Western U.S., across the globe. So, those kind of go hand in hand. As we heal the land, we get more nutrient dense food, but we really have to start with the land and really shift our perspective on how we use livestock as a tool to get our soils covered, to get those soils infiltrating rainwater again, and to heal the water cycle so that we can get more rain from the small water cycle. There's so many compounding and cascading effects involved in this work. So that's what we're trying to do here at Perennial Pastures, is do this at scale. We got 20 million people in Southern California and over 40 in the state. So we have a really captive audience and customer base to sell into that cares about this work and cares about their health. But there's not enough food for us to produce here alone in California. So we have to aggregate from ranches across the West, which is great for us because we want to maximize our impact. We're working with a ranch out of West Texas that's 230,000 acres. That's a
Holy cow.
pretty big ranch as far as ranches go. I think the largest ranch in the U.S. is just up over 1 million acres. The King Ranch, I believe, in Texas as well. So if we can put a few of these ranches together, we can really start looking at millions of acres of land to heal, and that's the sort of scale that we have to look at, because we're going to continue to have these health problems and these geopolitical problems if we don't heal our land. I think a lot of what you see in the Middle East can be sourced back to very terrible land management. There's no abundance in the Middle East. There's no resources to pull from. It's just a fight for survival over there. And if we could get back to a good land ethic, at least it would be a start to solving. So I'm not saying it's going to solve all the issues over there, but if we could get back to a good land ethic and have abundant resources in each country that we produce food in, which is all of them, then we'd be in a much better space as a population.
Yeah, there's a phrase that you just used a couple times that I've actually never heard. When you say heal the land, what do you mean by heal the land? That's not something that I've ever really thought about.
Physically, yeah. So getting the soil healthy again and using livestock in a way to, if it's bare ground, get grasses to germinate again, allowing those grasses to fully recover, get their root systems deep down into the ground, send sugars and photosynthate down into the ground to create chocolate cake, or what we call soil aggregation. And then that pore space allows water to seep in further down, and then you get deeper and deeper root systems and deeper topsoil. And you start to pull water vapor out of the air and put it into the ground where it needs to be. A lot of people talk about carbon, but water vapor is the number one determinant of our planet's weather dynamics. So literally physically taking bare ground and turning it into a perennial grassland with huge amounts of diversity of plant life, predominantly weighted with perennial grasses and a bunch of different types of perennial grasses. That's what I mean by heal. That's why we call ourselves Perennial Pastures, as we're trying to develop very dense perennial grasslands on all of the lands that we manage. And those perennial grasslands are littered with flowers and forbs and other species as well. Again, we don't want just the monoculture of perennial grass, but perennial grass is the start. Those perennial grass roots, if you look at any photos, if you can go to, Google the Land Institute, they're doing work on how deep the root systems are of perennial grasses, and they can be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 feet deep in a lot of cases. So if we can build topsoil back like that again, where we got roots going down that deep, we're going to be in a much better spot with fewer floods, more abundant protein sources on the planet, and just better, stronger land.
You brought up a guy named Alan Savory. Is that the guy who did didn't he do a lot of research in Africa?
Yeah, correct. He did.
Okay.
He was one of the original ecologists that came up with this rotational grazing method and ran the initial trials on moving your cattle and rotating your pastures, and showed that it had really good benefits for the land.
Yeah, because as we spoke about before the podcast started, I had the opportunity of going down to White Oak Pastures, and that was, and actually driving around the ranch with Will Harris, which was just such a cool experience. And I know Alan Savory had a massive impact on Will's decision to change his farming operation from industrial to regenerative. And it was cool to see, like, because some of his neighbors are still in the industrial conventional way. And you look at the land, and he's been doing this now for 20 years on this property. You look at the land that they have, and like the desolation, it's mundane. It looks dead. Like, it literally looks like dead land. And then there's a fence, and then he has his pastures, and it looks completely different, almost like two different ecosystems, which I guess in a way it is. But I think that that's one of the things that I find so fascinating, and I've heard you talk about it on several podcasts about having people on your ranch, like bringing people to the ranch to see for themselves. Is that something that's still very important to y'all?
For sure, yeah. Transparency is huge for us, and having folks get to see where we are on our journey. Will's 20 years ahead of us. We're 2 years into our regenerative grazing program, and it's fun to see the progression each year, to talk about it, show people that, and yeah, just again be transparent with our customers. We're big on data, so we're part of the @Regenified certification group, which is owned by Gabe Brown and Alan Williams and his business partners, and we believe it's one of the best certifications, if not the best certification that's out there for quantifying regenerative agriculture. So we're excited to be a part of that and honored to be a part of that. And they have a whole tiered system, which for me as an athlete, it's important because there's always a higher bar to get to and a higher level to get to. So we're only in tier 1 right now. We don't even get to use the seal. So we're spending money on certifications that we really right now don't even get the marketing benefit of, but we believe it's important to monitor the land and to show the progression of starting out from 0 and going to 100.
And when you say certification, that just basically means different practices, different measurements or metrics that are used on the property that get you to that next tier. Is that what that means?
Yeah, and you can go to their website, regenified.com, just like how it sounds, and they have their whole 634 verification system published on the site. It's a big PDF document, and it talks about the 6 principles of soil health, the 3 rules of regenerative agriculture, and the 4 ecosystem processes. And the 4 ecosystem processes come from holistic management and Alan Savory, but they added the 3 rules and the 6 principles for soil health. And so, yeah, we really try to work with those on a daily basis, but it shows the progress of how we're doing. Is our soil getting more and more covered? Are we getting more and more perennial grasses? Do we have litter on our land? Is the soil actually getting more aggregated and having more pore space? What's the water infiltration look like? All sorts of metrics like that we're doing monitoring on the land, on the ranch.
And you're in an interesting position, I guess, because as I mentioned, I spoke with Will, who kind of has a much different path than you. He was a farmer his whole life and started out one way, and then made the flip. You kind of started in that regenerative, or at least with that in mind, like the permaculture. You at least started with that in your mind. What would you say is the biggest barrier for somebody that was in your shoe, or what was your biggest barrier? Like, what was your biggest barrier to getting into regenerative ranching, as opposed to if you want to be a rancher going and doing something that's more conventional?
I'd say the hardest thing for somebody getting into ranching today who's first generation or hasn't done it before is having the ability to go out and get some capital. We bought an existing cattle company, and I did that through raising investment capital with investors. So I was blessed to have that. Some of that training, a lot of that I had to teach myself, but I learned some of those things in college. I'd say most of it I learned outside of college, but without that, it's hard to go and get a big start. We lease all the land that we have now, so that took the hurdle of buying land out of the equation. But to succeed well in ranching, you need some scale. And if you want to really build a business, you need some scale. And scale, especially in the West, means thousands of acres of land and hundreds of cattle, or, thousands of sheep or thousands of goats. So uh, I'd say it's having the plan to go out and you probably have to go work with the rancher first, but then how do you go from working with the rancher without any background and then making the jump as a hand on the land to then running your own operation? It's a big jump. I just went right into it, and I was blessed to have great a great team, great cowboys to help me manage the cattle, because obviously I didn't have that skill. Growing up in downtown LA, I wasn't riding my horse to school or anything. So, but I'm learning a lot of that now, the hard skills. And the hard skills come, but you got to know kind of where you can really fuck up, and make sure you don't do that, because there can be a lot of traps and areas to have disasters in this business. So you got to mitigate the risk. You got to have a good plan. Eventually, probably go out and get a chunk of capital and have a good enough plan to convince investors or a bank to give you some money to go out. And I would recommend starting out leasing land. Greg Judy has a lot of thoughts on that. He's a big regenerative rancher out of Missouri, and he talks a lot about getting your start with leasing and improving somebody else's land. But eventually, I do want to own land, and that's the next step in this business, is going out and buying land within the company and being able to control our own destiny on that, because you don't always get to do exactly what you want to do on leased land. It's a lot easier on your own land.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question. Is what are the limitations of leasing compared to ownership? Obviously, you hope and pray and you do your research to find a landowner that is at least aligned with your vision, but there obviously is, as you mentioned, some limitations to that. How do you navigate um, those waters?
Um, Good question. I'd say the toughest part about leasing land is not being able to put the infrastructure in that you want to put in. This business is highly dependent upon fencing and water infrastructure to move the cattle around in a way that actually regenerates the land. So a lot of landowners, aren't really educated on this model, or maybe they don't want you putting wells in the ground, or they can make it difficult. So that's probably one of the toughest deals, is just being able to develop the land you want in your own way without having to, because a lot of this infrastructure you're putting in is more or less semi-permanent. You know, you put water pipe in the ground, it's hard to go take that water pipe back up. You put fences in, it's hard to go to. So the knowledge of knowing that's a sunk cost in the land that you don't own is tough. So you can have good ironclad leases that are longer term and work with folks that aren't trying to turn the land over a whole bunch to new tenants. But that's probably the biggest struggle, is making sure that you have the security to invest into the asset.
Yeah, and then you mentioned that the hard skills will help you avoid traps, which definitely makes sense. But what are some of those traps that you're referring to?
Not taking care of your animals in the right way, not keeping them fat, not raising them right. You can end up with some real bad mistakes where your cattle just don't grow out in a way and you don't have a really good marketable product. You could have potentially a lot of death loss. I mean, cattle are pretty resilient, but if you're ranching sheep or goats, you know, and you don't have the livestock guardians or dogs or, you know, things in place, you could have a lot of death loss from predators. Um, and you can, you know, you can overbuy, you can overstock the place and have to feed. There's just a lot of different potential pitfalls that could occur in the livestock business. So starting small, being a little conservative, not overstocking your land, making sure you're not dependent upon feeding. Those are a lot of the risks that you could run into when you first start out.
What is what's the average? I guess I'm sure it depends on the land quality and just the different parcel. But what's the average acre per head that you need to to operate in the way that you would like to?
It depends wherever you're ranching. Highly dependent upon rainfall and the brittleness scale that I mentioned earlier. But where we're at, it's anywhere from 15 to 20 acres to the cow is what you need for them to graze year round.
That's pretty wild. I think for people, even myself, I'm not a rancher. I've only been on a handful of ranches in my life, but you think about that's a lot of land for one cow.
For sure, yeah. I mean, they eat about 30 pounds of forage, dry matter intake a day. So, yeah, when you start looking at that across an acre, it goes pretty quick.
Do you have a favorite part of the lifestyle that you've created being a rancher? Like, is there a part of your day to day or your weekly or monthly to do list that you're like, holy cow, this is incredible that I get to do this?
Definitely, you know, being out on the land with the cattle on horseback is probably the best. That's what a lot of people, I think, look forward to. It's the sexiest, most romantic piece of the job, you know, is being a cowboy. But I'd say I only get to do that 1 to 2% of my time right now. I do want to do it more and be out on the land and trying to build my team in a way where I can do a lot more educating. I love the farm and ranch tours that we do too, because I get to talk to people, you know, our customers who are really fired up on what we're doing. And that gives me a lot of energy for sure, is answering their questions and getting to talk passionately about what we're doing and see the excitement in their eyes. So those are a few things I'd say, you know, that are really the highlights of my day and the job when I get to do them. But again, we do one ranch tour a month, and then I don't get to be horseback very often right now at this stage of the business, but hopefully more and more as we go here.
What's the number one way y'all capture customers? Like, is it the ranch tours, the farmers markets, social media? How do y'all capture the majority of your customers that you sell to?
It's a variety of different channels. Definitely farmers markets is a big one. Social media, email newsletters, and then yeah, the farm and ranch tours are a big one. But we only have like 40 on each one of those tours, so it's not a big deal there. But yeah, those are probably some of them. Twitter, you know, Meat Mafia guys are helping us on the Twitter side, and that's a growing audience for us too. So we're stoked on all those channels, really.
What would you say like the biggest barrier to y'all's growth is? Like, what's the thing that you need or that you wish right now that you had that would be able to allow y'all to take that next step as a company, and then also subsequently as your impact?
I'd say really just getting the word out there and building our list and trying to get more customers is probably the number one goal and focus for us. We know we have a good product, we got a good community, we're building a good company, but it's continuously going out there and introducing ourselves to new folks. I would say is the big thing that we're really trying to work on moving forward. So that looks a lot like ad campaigns on social media, going on podcasts such as this to broaden our audience and talk about our message of what we're doing. So we thank you for the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you coming on. The one thing that I was thinking about in preparation for this, knowing that your story started as a baseball player with a business degree and tech sales and all that type of stuff, was there a level of imposter syndrome for you, like going into what you do now, considering the stark the starkness of the difference between like your first and second life, more or less? Was there any like imposter syndrome that you were dealing with, or did you kind of just full send?
Uh, I tried to tiptoe in as best I could, knowing that I didn't know everything, and try to surround myself with people that uh, knew what I didn't know. So just try to be as confident as you can. In starting this endeavor, I failed once before already at a previous ranching project, and so I took a lot of what I learned from that into this endeavor, and that helped me to have the confidence of not making those same mistakes again. So I just try to be as authentic as I could, and not claim that I'm some awesome cowboy or great horseman or anything like that, which I'm still not, and will probably take me 10 years to be. But also being confident in my abilities to market and build a company and build a good business, and not shying away from that either. You got to make sure that you have that confidence to surround yourself with really good and talented people.
Yeah, it sounds like that's a common theme for you, and I think that's a very important takeaway for me, at least, just the idea, because I think that covers up for any imposter syndrome or lack of belief in yourself that would have otherwise shown up. You can kind of mitigate by being intentional and wise about who you surround yourself with, because they, as you mentioned, they cover for your weaknesses, and you cover for theirs. So it's kind of like that symbiotic relationship, which in a lot of ways kind of mimics, like, I guess, how you're trying to steward the land and the cattle. One question I wanted to ask: we've talked about like perennial pastures and you specifically, but like the regenerative movement as a whole, just the fact that it's better for the land, it's better for the ranchers, it's better for the community, it's better for the animals, it's better for me as the consumer. What can I do, or somebody that's listening, uh, as a consumer, do? Like, what's the number one thing that we can do to continue to push this revolution, as you called it?
Go out and meet your farmer or rancher and shake their hand and just ask them questions. Support regenerative ranchers that really know what they're doing and are pressing soil health forward as a key factor of what they're doing. And yeah, just get more educated. Watch documentaries on regenerative agriculture. Read some books. There's just so much content out there today that highlights this movement and this work. And the more educated you get, the better consumer you're going to be, and the more intelligent consumer you are, you're going to be voting with your dollars and supporting businesses such as Perennial Pastures. And sales and creating a profit is, for businesses like ours, is really what's going to make the change in this world that we want to see. So it's probably the biggest thing that you could do.
It's so interesting to hear you say that, because Will Harris's answer to a similar question was more or less, for ranchers to continue to do this, and for new ranchers to make the change or to start ranching this way, exactly what you just said. They literally have to be profitable. Like nobody's going to go into a non-profitable endeavor on purpose and not see a return. So that makes a lot of sense. One thing that I think could be overwhelming to somebody like myself or a consumer who's never been to a ranch or never met a rancher is actually the idea of going to a farm. What are some things that, like, if I were to go to a ranch right now and say, hey, uh, Mr. Rancher, I want to get to know you and your product and what you know about this. What are some questions that I would actually ask that rancher that would help me give an insight or give insight to me about the practices that they use?
Yeah, just you could ask them about their practices. What do they do? How do they move their cattle? What are their recovery periods? What kind of densities are they getting on the land? You know, what sort of metrics and KPIs are they trying to hit from an ecological standpoint? Trying to think of other, canned questions, but like, what's your soil organic matter? What are your infiltration rates? I think what we're going to start doing is doing some education around that for our consumers so that they know that we're thinking about these things, and then they can then internalize that knowledge for themselves and potentially go ask other folks that they're buying from. Obviously, we want everybody to try to get their beef and chicken and other products from us, but let's say they're buying eggs from somebody else. All of these products come from the soil. So if you ask them pretty detailed questions about that, and can get a little bit into the nitty gritty of it all, in terms of, diversity is another big one. How diverse are your pastures or are your fields? Because diversity in a lot of ways leads to nutrient density in the products. So if our pastures have 20 different species of grasses and forbs, then the animals are ingesting that and they're getting secondary compounds in those plants that we can't eat, but then get turned into meat or milk, and then through the animal we can eat and make us healthier. They're antifungal, antiviral, anti-inflammatory compounds that are really amazing. Uh, that's the beauty of meat and milk, is those animals can turn things we can't eat into stuff that we can. And it's literally medicine. So yeah, so I would say some simple questions that folks could ask their fellow farmers and ranchers.
Yeah, I think it's like you mentioned before. I think it starts with the self-educating. YouTube, documentaries, books. There's a ton of, you could literally just type in regenerative ranching books and things like that you could learn. Because I'm trying to imagine somebody who doesn't know what any of that means asking a rancher like about density or recovery periods, and then hearing their answers and just being like completely blank. But it starts with
Sure,
that information uh,
sure.
gathering.
Just create a conversation. That, like, the red flags that'll come are just be like, oh yeah, yeah, we do that, and no explanation, or yeah, yeah, we got that system in place, and no explanation. They deflect to another. So the more you can educate yourself and literally have a conversation with them. I love it when folks ask me those questions because I've got, you know, answers upon answers and data upon data to kind of talk to them about. And we will have more and more as we get into this thing. So yeah, it's when we can get to that level where the consumers know, you know, 50% of the knowledge of what the ranchers know, then that's just going to be a much better spot for us in the food system.
Well, you mentioned the word transparency before, and I think that's key here as well. Like, it's so necessary. The food system used to be as transparent as like either A, I grow my own or kill my own, or B, it's my neighbor and I see everything that he does, or the townsman, the town rancher, I see everything he does. Now there's so much. It's so opaque and like hard to see through. So I think you're right that the best thing to do is just try to create that conversation and create transparency, which I think is awesome what y'all are doing. The idea about the education stuff, I think that would be awesome, because that's content that even if I don't buy from y'all because I'm all the way in Atlanta and there's a ranch closer to me, I could still gain a ton of value from that content. So I think that's a really cool idea.
Yeah, that's really where I want to go. Like moving forward is just uh, try to set the business up where I'm not necessarily working in the business all the time. Making sure our insurances are good and workers comp and all the day-to-day office stuff, but out there actually in the field doing, I think, what I'm most passionate about and is my strongest skill set, which is a lot of the educational side of things. And so yeah, that's where we hope to go here in 2024 and beyond.
Very cool. More power to you. Well, the last question I have for you, it's kind of the theme of the podcast. It's called the Tyro experience. Tyro means novice or beginner and stems from the Latin word meaning young soldier. And I've yet to meet a person that ever heard of that word before I told them, which I find funny. But um, in many ways, I envision myself as a Tyro, and you actually mentioned it earlier about continually learning and learning and learning. So my question to you is really the way that I perceive a Tyro or somebody that is a Tyro now in today's world is somebody because it in that context it referred to somebody that was entering the military. In the context that I view it through is somebody that's in an arena and they're standing firm. They know they're in an arena. They know they're in a battle. It's not like a one battle already. They know it's going to be a fight, but they're running towards the middle and ready to fight because it's the fight for their life. So my question to you is, what are you fighting for? What is the arena that you're in that you're running towards the center of?
Yeah. And what's that Franklin D. Roosevelt quote? The credit goes to the man in the arena. I love that quote. It's one of my favorite ones.
I think that's Teddy Roosevelt, but I know which one you're talking
Okay,
about.
Teddy. Yeah, there you go. One of the Roosevelts. But I'd say I'm fighting for the total healing of our food system and fighting for the healing of families and for people to kind of come back to the land and come back in connection with it. There's a lot of forces in the world that want to produce cheap food, plant-based food. There's a ton of propaganda out there. So, we're fighting against a lot of larger forces. You and Will probably discussed the monopolies and consolidation that exists in the meat packing industries and some of the product of origin labeling issues that are out there today. So, fighting the government, fighting regulation, and fighting the forces that make it hard to run a business, especially in California. It's not a very pro business state, so uh, just really trying to survive so that we can provide the most value to our customers, and continue to be profitable so that we can pay people good salaries and good wages to have a career in this field. Is really the fight probably every single day, that I'm working towards, and we're definitely making headway. I'm a big Gladiator fan, and so I envision myself as Maximus Decimus Meridius. I actually named my son Maximus Aramis Muno, sort of
Nice.
after, and Maximus, as you know, was a farmer as well. So being sort of a peaceful warrior type, I think is uh, a good model to follow. Right, we have to be able to fight when we need to, but our modus operandi can be peace and abundance, and I think that's the key kind of in today's world. So I like the theme of your podcast. I think that's very cool. I think we need that mentality of always learning, but also fighting for what we love in this world.
Yeah, the Gladiator reference. That's top three movie for me for sure. The whole storyline, even the scene that I think of is when he's going back to his house and his hand, or the scene that keeps going through like the wheat, the hand.
Yeah, yeah,
It makes me want to farm. But
for
also it
sure.
sounds like your son's gonna be a savage.
Yeah, exactly. He's gonna have to live up to his name for sure. So
That's awesome. And it also reminds me of that quote: "It's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war." Um,
yeah,
we need to be able to fight for. We don't have to fight all the time, but I think we need to be able to fight for what it is that we believe in. And it sounds like that's what you're doing. And I have the utmost respect for you and Perennial Pastures and the message and the mission that you mentioned earlier. It's really cool to be able to talk to you about it. I appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks, Nolan. I'm glad our friends got us connected, and I hope to meet you in person someday. And best of luck to you with your podcast and your mission.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I appreciate you.
You too, brother.